Wyoming Territory in the spring of 1857 was a place where survival came before every dream. The last snow had just melted from the mountain passes, turning the meadows soggy and sending cold water rushing through every creek. Hartwell's trading post stood in the middle of that wild land, tired and leaning from seasons of hardship. Its roof leaked, its windows were patched with deer hide, and the place carried the smell of old smoke and forgotten days. Inside lived widow Margaret Hartwell and her 2 daughters. The family had once done well, but when Margaret's husband Duncan froze to death in a blizzard 3 winters before, everything changed. The fur market collapsed, wagon routes shifted, and business dried up until the post felt like a skeleton of what it used to be. Margaret tried to keep it alive, but the debts kept growing like weeds in summer. Her daughters were nothing alike. Lily, at 22, was everything the frontier admired. Golden hair that glowed like September wheat, blue eyes bright as wildflowers, and a figure that made even weathered trappers forget their manners. She moved through the post like she was too fine for the rough world around her, with laughter sweet enough to make a man feel important. Her beauty was the kind that turned heads, opened doors, and made people forget the truth about how hard life really was. Then there was Sarah. At 26, she had already been quietly pushed aside by most of the territory. A dark birthmark shaped like a thumbprint rested on her cheek. She walked with a limp from a childhood rattlesnake bite that had weakened her leg forever. Her hair was the plain brown of creek water over stones, usually braided simply, with no ribbons or decorations. She wore faded dresses patched at the elbows and worked harder than anyone in the place. Sarah kept the post running while Lily collected attention. She harvested herbs, managed the root cellar, kept the books, prepared food, butchered game, and did every task that survival required. She never expected to be noticed. But everything changed the day Jacob Thornton rode in. Word had reached the territory that the mountain man was looking for a wife. He was nearly 40, tall, lean, quiet, and known for living deep in the high country, where wolves, storms, and loneliness tested a person every day. He had money, a good reputation, and a solid cabin up near the Hoback River. Most importantly, he wanted a practical wife. Someone to help him survive the mountain life. When the family heard he was coming, Margaret felt hope for the first time in years. If Lily married a man like Jacob, the family could be saved from losing everything. Lily understood this better than anyone. She disappeared into her room and came back, glowing. Her best calico dress fitted perfectly, her hair shining and arranged in soft waves, her lips touched with berry color. She looked like a vision meant to be chosen. Meanwhile, Sarah was out back splitting wood because nobody asked her to come inside. Late that afternoon, Jacob Thornton arrived. He rode a tough buckskin horse, the kind that could survive anything. He had a strong build, a dark beard with streaks of gray, and a guarded expression that came from years spent alone in the wilderness. He spoke little and watched everything with sharp eyes. Margaret hurried to greet him and set out stew and cornbread under the cottonwood tree. She placed Lily in the perfect spot to catch the warm light of evening, sure that Jacob would fall under her spell like every other man who passed through. Lily tried to charm him with sweet words about his adventures, but he didn't bite. He answered her politely but without interest. He wasn't here for stories or pretty words. He was here to choose someone who would last through storms and hardship. Then Jacob's eyes drifted across the yard. Sarah had come around the corner carrying firewood, her dress faded, her limp more noticeable after a long day of work. She kept her head down and moved with careful efficiency as she stacked the wood. She was sweaty, tired, and plain compared to her sister. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't even know he was watching. But Jacob watched her closely, the way she moved, the way she worked, the way she didn't pretend. He set down his spoon. "Who's that?" he asked. Margaret blinked like she hadn't expected the question. "That's Sarah, my eldest. She runs most of the practical work here." Jacob's eyes followed Sarah again as she limped back toward the storehouse. He took in everything about her silently. Then he turned back to the table and said the words that froze the entire yard. "I appreciate your hospitality, ma'am, but I'd like permission to court Sarah." The silence was heavy enough to break. Lily went pale as milk. Margaret stared like she had been slapped. Sarah stopped walking, firewood still in her arms, her gray eyes wide with confusion. Jacob stood and walked toward her until he was close enough for her to look up at him. "I'd like to court you," he said simply. "Why?" Sarah asked, her voice rough from disbelief. "Because you work hard," he said. "Because you're practical. Because you don't pretend. Because you're real." She stared at him like she didn't know how to breathe. "I'm not pretty," she said. "I'm not looking for pretty," he replied. And in that moment, under the cottonwood tree, something inside Sarah's life shifted. Something nobody expected. Something nobody understood. Except Jacob Thornton. Why would a man choose a woman no one else ever bothered to see and fight for her like she was the only thing that mattered? Sarah didn't sleep much that night. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the rafters while Lily breathed angrily across the room. The silence felt sharp, full of things neither of them dared to say. Why had Jacob chosen her? Why had he looked at her the way no one ever had? She had nothing Lily had. No beauty, no charm, no ease in conversation. Only work, responsibility, and the kind of strength that came from being overlooked her whole life. But he had chosen her, and that truth followed her through, every hour, until Jacob returned 3 days later, just like he promised. He found her behind the trading post, hands in the soil, tending the small herb garden she had coaxed into life from nothing. He didn't waste time on greetings. He didn't bring flowers or pretty words. He simply dismounted and said, "Need to talk." She led him to the creek where the rushing snowmelt drowned out every other sound. They stood side by side, watching the water run wild and cold over the stones. Jacob spoke first. "I live rough," he said. "My cabin's small. Winters are long and mean. Summers are too short. Food can run low. Neighbors are miles away. Work never ends." Sarah nodded. He looked at her then, really looked, as if trying to see straight into the truth of her. "I want a partner, Sarah. Not a decoration. Not a woman who needs soft things I can't give. I want someone honest, someone steady." His voice dropped lower. "I won't promise love. I can't." She didn't flinch. "I'm not asking for that." "Why not?" he asked. She watched the current swirl around a fallen branch. "Because no one's ever looked at me that way," she said softly. "Men look at Lily. Women like me, we're the ones nobody remembers. Being needed is more than I expected." Quote, Jacob studied her face, the birthmark she usually tried to hide, the tired lines of a woman who had worked too hard for too long. "You're tougher than you look," he said. "Have to be," she answered. "The world doesn't go easy on people like me." He nodded once, firm. "If you're willing, I'll court you proper. We'll see if we suit, and if we do, we marry. If not, no harm." She took a slow breath, then another. "Jacob," she said quietly, "I'm willing." He blinked, just once, like her answer hit him somewhere he hadn't expected. He reached into his shirt and handed her a folded note. "Read that when you're alone," he said. "I write better than I talk." Then he mounted up and rode off. Sarah waited until the sound of his horse faded before unfolding the note. The handwriting was rough but careful. "Your absence bothers me more than your presence should. I don't understand it, but it's true. J.T." Her heart stuttered. She folded the note and slipped it close to her chest. 3 weeks later, Jacob asked her to marry him. No ring. No flowers. No fancy words. Just truth. "Preacher's in the valley," he said. "He'll leave tomorrow. If you want to marry today, we can." It should have frightened her. Instead, it steadied her. "Yes," she said. "Today is fine." The wedding was small, simple, real. A traveling preacher stood under the cottonwood. Margaret watched with tight lips. Lily wore black as if mourning her own pride. A few trappers gathered out of curiosity. Sarah's dress was plain gray cotton, her hair braided neat. No ribbons, no veil. Jacob wore his best buckskins and held his hat against his chest. His voice didn't shake when he said, "I do." Hers didn't shake either. The kiss was brief, shy, warm. It felt like the start of something neither dared to name. When it was done, Jacob helped her mount the mare he'd brought for her. He didn't rush her when her bad leg made the movement awkward. He just steadied her without a word. They rode north, deeper into the mountains, deeper into a life she had never imagined. His cabin appeared in a clearing, small, sturdy, built from steady hands and hard years. One room, a stone fireplace, shelves neat with tools, a bed big enough for two. "It's not much," Jacob said. "It's more than I expected," she answered. They settled into awkward routines that slowly softened. Mornings began with coffee, evenings with quiet. They shared a bed but stayed carefully apart. Neither pushed. Neither pretended. Then Sarah fell sick. The fever took her fast. Chills, weakness, burning heat. She tried to hide it, tried to work through it, but Jacob found her collapsed by the creek and carried her into the cabin like she weighed nothing at all. For 5 days and nights he stayed by her side. He held cold cloths to her forehead. He forced water into her when she fought it. He sat through the long nights whispering, "Don't die. Don't you dare die." When she woke fully, the fever broken, his head was resting against the edge of the bed, his hand wrapped around hers like he had been holding on for dear life. "You scared me," he said when he noticed she was awake. "I can't stand the thought of losing you." "Why?" she whispered. He swallowed hard. "I don't know when it happened," he said, "but somewhere along the way you stopped feeling like an arrangement. You started feeling like mine." Her breath trembled. "And you? Do I matter to you, Jacob?" He cupped her face gently, thumb brushing her cheek. "You matter," he said. "More than I meant for you to." It wasn't a confession of love, but it was the truth that cracked him open. And it changed everything. What happens when the woman, who was never chosen, suddenly becomes the only thing a man can't bear to lose? Autumn settled over the mountains slowly, painting the ridges gold and sending a quiet chill through the air. Life with Jacob found its rhythm, and Sarah felt something she had never known before, a place where she belonged. She cooked, tended the small garden, dried herbs, learned the mountain paths, and worked beside Jacob like she had been born for this life. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. But peace never lasts long on the frontier. It started the day Red Cameron rode into their meadow with an unexpected guest. Behind him, stiff on a borrowed horse, sat Lily. Sarah froze when she saw her sister dismount with the help of Red's steady hands. Lily's clothes were too fine for mountain country, her hair too neat, her expression too sharp for someone who simply came to visit. She walked forward with a smile that was all sweetness and spite. "My goodness, Sarah," she said lightly, "you've become quite the frontier woman." Jacob watched Lily with the same warning stillness he used when watching a wolf get too close to their camp. Lily spent the evening poisoning the air with small comments. "You look tired, Sarah. All this work must be too much." "Oh, Jacob, how do you stand living in such rustic conditions?" "I simply could never live this far from civilization." Sarah said nothing. Lily's words were sharp, but Sarah had weathered worse storms. But Jacob heard every word, and each one tightened his jaw a little more. The second evening, Lily struck where she thought Sarah was weakest. "Mr. Thornton," she said sweetly, "may I speak to you in private? It's about Sarah's condition." Quote, Jacob didn't look up from sharpening his knife. "Anything you've got to say it where my wife can hear." Lily's smile showed teeth. "Well," she said lightly, "Sarah never told you that the fever she had as a child left her barren. She will never give you children. I thought you deserved the truth." Sarah's breath caught. Her worst fear spilled into the air like smoke. Jacob stood slowly. "Is that true, Sarah?" Her voice was small but steady. "I don't know. The doctors weren't sure." "I should have told you." "Why didn't you?" "Because you said you wanted practical, not love. And I didn't think you would care." Jacob set the knife down with quiet finality and turned to Lily. "Get out!" Lily blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Pack your things. Red's leaving in the morning. You go with him. But I? You came here to hurt her, Jacob said, stepping closer. To make her feel small. To make me doubt her. Maybe you thought you could take her place. He looked her up and down once, with the cold judgment of a man who saw through people. You're beautiful, Lily, but you're cruel. And cruel breaks faster than bone in these mountains. Lily's face twisted. She can't even give you children. She's useless to you. Jacob didn't even flinch. Who says I need children? Who says I don't love her? The room froze. Sarah's heart pounded. Lily's mouth fell open. Jacob seemed almost surprised he'd spoken the words out loud, but he didn't take them back. He turned to Sarah, and for the first time he looked at her without walls, without distance. Things changed, he said quietly. You changed me. What I wanted changed. He stepped closer, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't hide anymore. You think I don't love you, woman? I can't breathe right when you're not in the room. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Jacob, I don't care if you can have children, he said, taking her face in his hands. You're enough. You've always been enough. And I will never let anyone make you feel otherwise. Then he kissed her, fierce, certain, claiming, right in front of Lily. When he pulled back, he didn't look away from Sarah. You're my wife, my partner, my equal. That's all that matters. Lily left the next morning and never returned. Winter came early that year, heavy and relentless. But inside the cabin, the fire burned warm, and Jacob and Sarah built a life made of small moments. Shared chores, quiet evenings, laughter that grew easier, and a love that took root deep and strong. In March, Sarah realized she was late. Her hands trembled as she held the truth close to her chest. When she told Jacob, he went still as stone. Sarah, are you sure? Quote, yes. His breath shook. Then he pulled her into his arms so tightly she could feel his heart pounding against her cheek. I never thought, he whispered. I never let myself hope. Their daughter Clara arrived in November, red-faced and furious at the cold world she'd entered. Jacob cried when he held her, tears falling into his beard as he pressed his cheek to hers. 3 more children followed through the years. Daniel, Grace, and Thomas. The cabin grew, their small meadow farm flourished. Then the mountain man who had once promised he could never love, learned that love often grows in the quiet spaces between hardship and hope. One day, years later, Sarah found Jacob's old note tucked between the pages of her Bible. Your absence bothers me more than your presence should. J.T., she smiled softly, then wrote beneath it. And your presence became my home. S.T. She stepped outside to find Jacob teaching their son to set a trap while their daughters gathered wood, the mountains rising around them like ancient guardians. She had been the forgotten sister, the plain one, the shadow no one noticed. He had been the man too broken to want love again. But together, they became something unbreakable. Because real love isn't always pretty. It's steady, it's patient, it's strong. And it sees what the world refuses to look at.